Well, I'll tell you a little story. When I was in 8th grade in high school, middle school that is, I realized there was a problem with learning and with the way things were being taught to me. At that point, I knew there had to be something else out there. And when I first started teaching, I already started doing STEM right off the bat because to me, common sense taught me this was the right way to do things. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? I mean, it's not a really difficult process. Why would we use STEM in the first place? Okay, first thing is it gives students the ability to use their strengths. Okay, they can do it any number of ways. There is no one way to do STEM. And as a teacher, I find that an excellent thing. Okay, they get to look at a broad spectrum of ideas and content. They can integrate and connect all different ideas from different subjects, and they can treat everything as if it's interrelated. So it's an interdisciplinary way of doing things. Even IBDP is interdisciplinary. That's the main goal of it. So if they're doing it, and it's considered a more advanced way of doing things, by starting STEM in 8th grade and doing interdisciplinary work, we're getting them ready for the IB program. Okay? It uses an inquiry-based approach, which is becoming more and more common now. Nice thing about inquiry-based is you give students a problem and you let them go off and do it. Okay? Also, students get to express their creativity. And this is one of the things that was always stifled when I was in high school. It was always do it this way, do it this way. And it got to the point where when I was in 8th grade, I annoyed my science teacher so much that he told me he was going to kill me. Okay, so what to do, right? Conform for the time being. Okay, so another thing is it helps to identify all these problems and real-world problems that people come up with every day. These are things that need to be solved. And many people don't know how to solve them. So if you can fix somebody's problem, you're needed. Okay? They should be able to apply these skills at their grade level or even higher. Now this opens up a can of worms sometimes. I remember somebody once saying that the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. Well, this can be a trap, but it works really well if you pay attention. Okay? Stronger students can really take your class in a whole nother direction. And as a teacher, I'm a lifelong learner. So if a student can show me something, I'm happy. Okay? You can use engineering and design thinking, create new prototypes, modify existing things. And this is where creativity really comes in handy. Students can get the chance to see something and say, hey, I know a way to do that better. And there's no one way to do that. Again, they get to do it any way they want. Also, they get to learn how to use data and results to evaluate the success in the design modifications. In other words, did it work well? If not, change it again. Okay? Well, this is the basic approach. Figure out what's wrong, find a few solutions, make a model, test it, and then see if it works. If it doesn't work, make it better. Okay? When it comes to assessment, there should be certain things involved. We all know this as teachers, but with STEM it's a little different. Every time we make an assessment, we have to interpret our results. How we do that depends on us. You should have many different types of tasks so that you can address all the different aspects of learning and get a complete picture of a student's abilities. Any one type of assessment is not going to give you a good picture. Always ask yourself, what should my students be learning? Okay, how do they learn? How are they processing it? And what new skills should I be teaching them? What should they come away from this lesson with that is new and beneficial to them? Assessments can serve all different purposes, and there needs to be a lot of different kinds. But every single one of them should include these 3 dimensions. We call this 3-dimensional learning. So first, of course, science and engineering. Second, the cross-cutting concepts, which is now becoming a very big deal with NGSS. And disciplinary core ideas. Science classes always have those basic core ideas that we have to follow. Okay? Key goals. We want to get students interested. If they're not interested, they're not learning. And they're like what I used to do, doing bad things. I realize now probably I had a pretty bad case of ADD and I just didn't know it. okay? And we want to see their thinking in action. We want to see how are they doing it. We also want to have evidence of their capabilities. Otherwise, how can we assess? How can we prove that we're being effective as teachers? And we want them to come up with their own conclusions and be able to present them and defend them. This is probably one of the highest orders of thinking, to be able to stand before somebody or a group of people and defend yourself and defend your ideas. Okay? And they should be able to handle one or more core ideas at any given time. We also want evidence for teachers to gain information about how they're developing their understanding of these things, these concepts. Anything that would be useful for guiding what do we do next? Where do we go from here? Do I need to go back, fix things, do things again one more time? Or can we move forward now? And students, when you have a mixed bag of students with mixed capabilities, this can be particularly challenging. We also want to demonstrate the characteristics of learning that the NGSS now requires of our students. It's not an easy thing to do. The NGSS is very demanding. And we had one lady out here that was asking about the time. How do you meet the time requirements and cover all these goals and assess? Requires planning. We want to improve their ability to apply these core STEM ideas. They start off young in 8th grade, they know how to do some things, but as they grow, they learn to do more and more. It also gives you information at when you need it to help keep your lessons on track and your progression. Shows your students are learning, their minds are growing, and they're getting better and better at solving these problems that they're going to face when they go out into the real world as adults, once they graduate from school. As we said before, whenever we do an assessment, there should be three-dimensional learning should be assessed. Okay? It should require students to use all these different aspects of engineering practices and be able to demonstrate and defend their understanding of all these things, the cross-cutting concepts, disciplinary core ideas. There should be multiple components on any assessment, not just multiple choice, true, false, one little question here, but it should have all different aspects to it so you can cover different areas and strengths of the students. They should be able to do activities, work independently, build models, make prototypes, test them, okay, make an argument, defend their argument, reflect on the progressive nature of learning. Remember, learning is a progression. It starts here, it goes here, step by step. And they should produce a variety of products, not just one thing that you can use as evidence to score or grade your students. The best time to assess, and I think everybody here can agree with me on this, the best time to assess is either right in the middle of that lesson or right after. You're not going to get the same results or the same strength a day later, 2 days later. You hope you will. Maybe in time you will, but at first, the best way to gauge if they're learning at that moment, are you being effective, is to assess them at that time. Okay? I know there's a lot here. I'll just try to say it. Basically, summative assessments are not the best thing for STEM. They have their place. You know, multiple choice questions, and I hate to say this word, but standardized tests. There is no such thing as a standardized test, because there's no such thing as a standard student. I consider these types of exams to be, I guess, a wrench in the works. I have to deal with them as a teacher. The student has to take them. Yes, we get some information from it, but am I going to use that information as much as I would use from a more practical assessment? No, I won't. Okay? They're not personalized to the students. They're too general. And you may have an exam that is designed for one class of students, but not yours. The other teacher might have took the class in a different direction. We've all heard the term teachable moments, right? When you're in the class and your whole lesson just goes out the window because somebody asked you a question, and you have to answer it. And that takes your lesson a totally different way, okay? There's a lot of pressure on students, too. When they get these standardized tests, students tend to flip out. How many times have you seen students sit there staring at a test and like, and they're just looking around? I see this all the time. It means blank, and it happens to me, too. Okay? They're too high stakes, let's say it that way, all right? Writing and grading them is very difficult for teachers. How many people here have spent hours and hours on weekends grading these exams because your principal says, I want this in the database on Sunday? Okay? And you're saying, oh, what about the weekend? I'm going up to Ras Al Khaimah, I'm doing this. No, you're not. Okay? So, also, they don't consider all the different dimensions of student learning. There's just too many. Okay? And you have to have the flexibility to match how your students learn. So formative assessments are probably better. Whoops, there we go. They're more flexible. They give the teacher freedom. You can use class and work products. Anything the students did in class, you can use that to tell yourself something. See how well they're doing. And they give them opportunities to make these connections and these leaps of understanding that we call the aha moment. Without that, they're not learning. They're just memorizing. The best way for a student to learn is to do it on their own, without you holding their hand. There's unlimited types of formative assessments you can do. How you weigh them, how you judge them, is up to you. What kind of assessments you give is only limited by your imagination. Oftentimes, I've asked students, how would you like me to test you on this? Because they can tell me how they learn best. Okay? All different types of designs for activities and tasks that assess the three-dimensional learning, but what are the evidence you look for? And what are the things that tell you your STEM skills are growing? Written tasks, okay, everybody knows that. Class group discussion, guided, unguided, yeah, we know that too. Using clickers or remotes. How many people do that? I don't see any hands. Okay. Peer evaluation. It's really funny to watch a student's reaction when he asks me a question or he says, how am I doing, Mr. Martin? I say, you, come here. How is he doing? And they're like, oh man, he picked my enemy. Okay, but guess what? That's the best person to ask. Who else would you rather defend yourself against to learn if you did something right or wrong than your enemy? The one person who wants to tear you apart, he's going to find, or she's going to find every little weakness and help you. Frenemy. Okay? Exit slips, bell ringers, there's a lot of different things you can do. All right, this is something I just kind of put here for designing a task, but I think it's a little complicated and it's going to take a lot of time to talk about. Just basically say that level 7 is the hardest, where you just don't guide them in any way. You just hand them a problem and you say, here, solve it. Solve it any way you want. And as you go down to level 1, you find that it just gets simpler and simpler, more and more help. The more help they need, the less they know. Okay? So the students should be able to give you some kind of written, evidence-based argument that they can defend. They should be able to produce some kind of presentation using data, and of course, talk about the data. What does it mean? They can develop models, which can be a great way to start off a discussion in class. How many times have I had students make models and one guy looks at it and goes, that thing's a piece of junk. That's not going to fly. Well, maybe, maybe not. 2 years ago, I had my students design a hovercraft from one of those drones, and it had all kinds of problems. It took them probably 3 weeks just to get it working. And then I threw another thing at them. I said, now make it solar powered. Oh man, come on. But it worked, okay? You should be able to even use simulations. I don't know how many of you have used them, but the PhET simulations from University of Colorado, they work fantastic. Data collection, how many people use data logging devices? I still don't see any hands. Okay, not many. And the IB requires it. You have to do at least one lab for IB that uses data loggers in the course of the 2 years. Universities require data loggers. At least most do. Making displays that show all kinds of information, that's another thing, and talking about what the display tells you. Also, you can ask a student, or in a group discussion, you can say, well, why did you do this? What was your reasoning behind this? And this can lead you down so many paths, and you can get so much information from students this way, and in a very short period of time. When that starts, I stand back and I listen. I don't even say a word. I let them take it and run with it. And I get ideas. So, all right. Also, you can ask students to assess themselves as a team. And there's a nice little checklist. It's kind of blurry, unfortunately, but I assume you'll have access to this PowerPoint through the website for the organization. But it shows basically all different levels or capabilities that students can assess their group work. If they're doing a good job, if they're not doing a good job. And you can even use that, give that to other people and let them grade other groups. Okay? Project-based learning. Somebody else talked about this earlier. By its nature, project-based learning fits with STEM. It works really well. Okay? More hands-on learning projects they can do, the better. Inquiry-based, project-based learning, all good part of STEM, provides lots of learning opportunities. Of course, there's going to be failures, but we want that. Failure is the best way to learn. Nobody learns anything from success the first time. Well, when you're grading them can be tough. Since there's so many different types, how do you grade them all? There's no one way to do this. You have to approach it a different way for every different assignment, but you don't need to grade everything. You can take a more holistic approach, and you know your students, you know their capabilities, so let them do the work. Don't necessarily grade it and hand it back, but just make mental notes. Learning is still going to happen, whether you grade it or not. Okay? And if you become overwhelmed, just take a step back. You're not a superhero. Just do what you can. Grade what you need to grade to give yourself a good idea of your students' abilities. Also, you don't have to grade it in the traditional way. STEM learning is not traditional by any means. So why grade it in the traditional way? Find your own way. Okay? You can have students taking pictures of their work and sending it to you, and I have my students do that all the time. You can have them record, make a video or a video journal of what they're doing and send it to you. You can have students sketching projects, sketching ideas. Just let them create and monitor them. Watch, sit back and watch. Sometimes you'll be amazed by what you get. When everything is said and done, you've looked at your students, you've assessed your students, and as a side note, you've assessed yourself. If your students are successful, then you're doing a good job. You're being effective. But if your students are failing repeatedly, even the good ones, you need to take a step back and think, what am I doing? What do I need to do differently? Okay? But when you see good things, continue to focus on the things that work. In the U.S., we had this saying, teachers, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So do what works. Improve areas that you need to improve. Of course, this is typical, we know this. But always encourage your students to have a positive attitude and a positive outlook, because as long as they do, you will. And it goes the other way too. As long as you're positive, they will be. Stay away from negativity, because boy, does negativity spread. No problem is unsolvable. Okay? Rubrics help, but you don't want them to be too complicated. Basic rubrics, and you know, it doesn't hurt to share that rubric with your students. Everybody likes to know what they're going to be assessed on. Okay? So they don't feel like they've been deceived in any way. They knew what was expected of them from the very beginning, and they work towards that. So there's no, hey, how come I didn't get a mark for this? I didn't get a mark for that. Okay? But these rubrics should be specific enough to give you the information you're looking for. They should be usable, not overly complicated. At the same time, back to the holistic methods. Your way. Okay? Well, this is a big list, so I'm just going to say a couple things. How do you know you're doing a good job? Students should be able to do all of these. They should be able to come up with multiple new ways of doing things. They should show more and more ability to analyze and interpret data. They should be able to design and test prototypes like it's nothing. They should realize that there are things they can improve, they can make better, and they do this anyway. And they should be able to communicate these ideas. This is a big deal. Some students are good at science and technology, some students are good at engineering, some are good at math, some are good at art, and every student is some combination of these. So they let them do it their way from an art perspective, artistic way, and who doesn't think that engineering is artistic? Look at Burj Khalifa. It looks like a piece of art, okay? And you'll see the students enjoying the learning process. As long as they're having fun, they're learning. Their confidence will grow. They'll walk into the classroom, they'll put their books down, and just go right to work. No, Mr. Martin, what do I do? And that's one of the toughest parts of inquiry-based learning, is resisting the urge to tell students what to do. Many are going to ask at first, but you say, hey, this is your problem, solve it. Give them a little guidance here and there, but not too much. And then they take ownership of it. If they succeed on their own, it's theirs. And they're taking responsibility for their learning. If they fail, they know it's because they did something they shouldn't have, or they didn't do everything they could have. Okay? They'll be more and more interested in solving problems. They'll become more interested and engaged. They no longer show a fear of failure, because failure, again, is an opportunity to learn. And they'll be more and more curious about everything, all different topics. I can't tell you how many times I've had students come into my classroom and say to me, ask me a question about history. I'm like, wait, I'm not a history teacher. Oh, but it's cool stuff, though. Let's talk about Egypt. Let's talk about, Sumerians. Let's talk about, hey, did aliens create the earth? Okay, all different topics they'll come to you with. And that's one of my favorite, by the way. They always come to me when they watch one of those shows with these really strange ideas, but that's the best one. We find out that in STEM and in science, that often what we call the craziest ideas are the ones that are right. So I encourage my students. I tell them, look, if you have an idea that other students are going to laugh at you, I tell them on the first day of school, never laugh at your fellow students, because would they say something, they might be right. Einstein got laughed at a lot. Alfred Wegener, when he said that plates move, he was laughed out of the room. Unfortunately, it took 2 years after he passed away to prove he was right. Okay? And, of course, students should not be worried about expressing their ideas. So sometimes you can use this for your students. You can hand this to them and circle it, whichever one, and hand it to them to let them know where they fit and what you think of them at that point. Give them a goal. So there's so many conclusions we can take away from this, but basically we have to, as teachers, there are some basic things we all have to do to assess, but there's no way to do it. Flexibility and creativity are essential to being a STEM teacher. How many of us agree that our favorite feeling is when students come to us with a new way of thinking or solving a problem that we didn't think of? That's a proud moment for me. And then even better, when that student teaches me something. So that means I'm a proud papa. My kids have just taught me something. Okay? And the time that the students do this, reflecting on their information, collecting it, everything, is an integral part of your instruction and your assessment. Listening to your students, engaging with them, having conversations about the science and about the approaches, letting them defend their ideas and their responses, all part of the learning process. These assessments are not easy to design. Okay? They take time, they take effort, and you have to do a lot of different types. But for us to do this right, you have to take this approach, and you have to design and implement them properly. Take into consideration your students' strengths and weaknesses. Take into consideration the types of learners you have. Okay? And if you're not teaching STEM techniques, you're just not cool. Okay? So I have this little video I wanted to show you guys that of a STEM activity I did. I made a mountain climbing rope into 4 little ways with a knot in the middle, and I decided to teach my students about forces. So this is the very beginning of the lesson. They're still looking like, what do we do? Okay, but the goal was they had to predict which way I would go. This one was easy. Unfortunately, there's no sound, but is there sound? Hey, look at that. Okay. But if you listen carefully, you can hear them making connections. You can hear them realizing there was a mistake. Okay? Yes, I'm asking probing questions, but I'm letting them figure it out.
I would say it's not quite perfect, but it's close. So would you say that that was everybody pulling with equal force? Close, right? Okay.
Okay, next part. I have them line up in different configurations. Sometimes 2 this way, 2 this way, 3 this way, 1 that way. And again, make a prediction. This time I had three teams this way, 1 team that way. This wasn't easy on me physically. And you hear laughing, right? Essentially what happened here was I should have gone in one direction, and when they first started pulling, I went at a 45-degree angle, and they realized something was wrong with this. And they started pulling harder to correct which way I should have gone in the first place. They were able to make a decision and correct themselves on the fly. Okay?
There should have been a big difference.
Now it's 2 this way and 2 that way.
Okay, so were you guys all pulling the same amount? No. That was pretty clear to me that you guys were not pulling nearly as hard as you should have.
A little high five.
What about you guys? What happened here? What happened? If you guys were all pulling the same amount.
You see they're working it out amongst themselves. What's going on? Go to the last one. Just the last video clip.
Would I have gone that far? Definitely not. That's right. Okay.
Well, this one's interesting because they're like a plus sign, so I shouldn't move at all. And it's funny to see people falling down because they're pulling so hard. Get them up, get them moving, get them learning.
Stop pulling!
And the next one. Usually, just for fun, I do this last one where they all line up on one side and pull. This is just to to let them have a little fun with their teacher. Well, usually they scatter. Usually they go running in all different directions. But you can see that there is learning going on. Okay, you can hear it. You can see that they're happy, they're enthused, that they're having fun with this. And then the first thing they do is they run out. Guess what we did today? We got to pull Mr. Martin all over the place. And I used to do it without the dolly, but I learned the hard way that, the dolly makes it easier for me. The last time they did it to me, I was wearing American football helmet, shoulder pads, because I was getting beat up. Anybody like to ask me anything? I think I'm out of time anyway, but one question? One question.
They're great. So as a teacher, there's all these great ideas and covering the standards. Like, I get that, and the woman asked about the time earlier, but like when someone has a great idea like you have there, right? I'm having a hard time finding, and my colleagues are having a hard time finding a resource that would provide us a great activity like that. So where can we look to find these great ideas that some people are coming up with in like a shared way? Do you know
I
what I'm
think
saying?
probably the best way, if that's something that you're interested in, best is through social media, you know, connecting in a group of teachers and just to share their ideas. I mean, you can always, you feel free. I mean, if you want, I'll give you my email. I have lots of ideas.
Cool.
Some people, you know, one of my measures of success is how many times students tell me I'm crazy. The more times they tell me I'm crazy, aha, got them. They learned something. Thank you very much.